Some called it Judgment Day, others called it Armageddon. It took a while before anyone dared to call them zombies. The truth was hard to face. At first, the murders seemed random, grisly, yes, but not extraordinary. We had grown numb to horror, conditioned to push such things aside as distant tragedies. But then, missing people started returning. The walls of the missing, once ignored in big box vestibules, became our focus again. The milk carton faces of lost children and long-forgotten adults reappeared, but not as we remember them. People called them the returned. They emerged from shallow graves and swamps, from forests and basements, their bodies carrying the odor of decay. They were alien to us, devoid of speech or recognition, and seemed to be driven by some unrelenting purpose. They moved steadily, with no regard for pleas or barriers, always shuffling toward an unseen destination. We tried to reach out, to understand. But the returned ignored us, unflinching in their singular mission. Their presence was unnerving, and the questions they posed went unanswered. What brought them back? What did they want? They were not the loved ones we had lost. They were something else entirely. Then the killings began. The returned targeted specific people, policemen, politicians, community leaders, even convicted criminals. At first, the randomness of their victims puzzled us. But a television host, an icon for the missing, was the first to connect the dots. His tentative theory gained credibility when a journalist exposed that many of the victims had hidden sins involving the missing. The returned weren't driven by mindless hunger, but by a chilling, purposeful revenge. Panic spread. Guilty consciences drove men to confess crimes in droves, crowding jails in desperate bids for sanctuary. Yet even the fortified walls of maximum security prisons couldn't hold back the returned. Stories of guards accidentally letting them in hinted at a collective thirst for justice. At first, fear gripped us, but as their pattern of retribution became clear, something changed. Their vengeance was unerring. They never harmed the innocent. The returned became a chilling force of justice. People began to feel safer, even relieved. Crimes diminished under the shadow of their relentless judgment. But this fragile acceptance shattered with the death of the television host's wife. On live camera, her son's headless body appeared and claimed her life. The host, racked with despair, ended his life moments later. The act of violence against her, a woman whose grief had been so public, so raw, shocked us all. Had she been complicit in her son's death? Speculation erupted, but no evidence ever pointed to her guilt. Her death cast doubt over everything we thought we understood. Then came a chilling revelation. The returned didn't just seek revenge on those who committed crimes, but also on those who failed to protect their loved ones. Parents of murdered or missing children began taking their own lives, overwhelmed by guilt and anticipation of their fate. Others waited for the return to come, sitting on porches or in lawn chairs, resigned to their grim end. Among them was me. My Ruth, my sweet little girl, had vanished years ago. I sent her out to play that day because I was busy with chores that seemed so important then. Now they are meaningless. For years I've prayed, I've bargained, I've blamed myself and others. I've imagined her return 1,000 ways, alive, safe, or broken, and needing solace. But this vengeance feels like the most fitting end. I deserve it. Now I sit in my old rocking chair, the kitchen door ajar. I've left it open for Ruth, for when she comes. Samantha told me on our third date during what was supposed to be a perfect evening. We were sitting on her couch, a rom-com playing in the background, when I leaned in to kiss her. She stopped me, her hands suddenly pressing against my chest. I froze, confused by the interruption. "There's something you need to know," she said, her tone steady but serious. I braced myself, expecting to hear the cliched, "I'm not ready for a relationship." Instead, what came next completely floored me. "I have a removable face." My first reaction was to laugh, thinking it was a joke, but her expression didn't waver. "You have a what?" I asked, chuckling nervously. "I'm serious. My face can come off. Look closely." She tilted her head, running a finger along her jawline. For a moment, I forgot about her strange words, caught in the elegance of her movement. Then I leaned in, squinting, and noticed it, a faint seam along her jaw. My stomach churned as the weight of her revelation settled in. "I can't explain why or how," she said, cutting off the avalanche of questions forming in my mind. "If this is a deal breaker, I'll understand. But if you want to move forward with me, you have to accept it. And one more thing." Her voice softened, almost to a whisper. "Once a day, I need to remove it to clean the inside. You can never, ever look at my real face. Promise me that." Her eyes searched mine, waiting for an answer. My mind was spinning, grasping for something to hold on to. Was this a prank? Some kind of elaborate test? Or was she telling the truth? Against all logic, I found myself nodding. "I promise," I said, though I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. Samantha smiled then, and it was so genuine, so radiant that any lingering doubts I had evaporated. She excused herself, retreating to the bathroom to do whatever it was she needed to do. I sat there in stunned silence, my thoughts racing. What did she mean, a removable face? Could it be some kind of prosthetic? Was it hiding scars from an accident? The possibilities swirled in my mind, but one thing remained clear. I liked her. Whatever this was, I could handle it. When she emerged, her face perfectly in place, I stayed. She smiled again, and I realized I'd made my decision. Months turned into years. Samantha and I built a life together, filled with the usual joys and challenges of any couple. By day, everything felt normal. Her face was flawless, and only in rare moments of odd lighting or at certain angles could I catch the faintest hint of the seam. Nights, however, followed a strict ritual. Samantha would disappear into the bathroom for an hour, sometimes two, to clean the inside of her face. I never questioned it, at least not out loud. Sure, curiosity clawed at me, especially in the beginning. What did her real face look like? What was so terrible about it that it had to remain hidden? But I respected her boundaries, even as the questions lingered. Once, during my bachelor party, I told someone about Samantha's removable face. It was late, and my best friend Chris and I were standing on the cliffs of Big Sur, watching the sun rise. We were drunk and high, the kind of state where secrets seem lighter than air. "You're kidding," Chris said when I told him. "I'm dead serious," I replied. He bombarded me with questions, most of which I couldn't answer. "Don't you want to know what's underneath?" he pressed. "Of course I do, but she told me I can't look. That's love, man. Respecting boundaries." Chris laughed, shaking his head. "You're a stronger man than me. I'd have to know." 4 years later, Chris came to stay with us for a weekend. By then, Samantha and I had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The secret of her face was just another part of our lives, unspoken but ever present. That Saturday evening, after a day of beers and barbecue, Samantha announced she was heading to the bathroom for her nightly routine. I got called away for a work emergency, leaving Chris alone in the house. 15 minutes into my call, I heard the screaming. I ran inside, my heart pounding, and found chaos. Chris was stumbling out of the bathroom, his eyes bleeding as he clawed at them with a paperclip. Samantha stood in the doorway, her face hastily reattached, its edges uneven. Her voice was raw with panic. "Call an ambulance!" she screamed. "He looked! Oh God, he looked!" I froze, the reality of what had happened hitting me like a tidal wave. Chris had broken her rule. He had seen her real face, and now he was paying the price. The aftermath was a nightmare. Chris survived but was left blind and deeply traumatized. He oscillated between catatonic silence and bouts of violent mania, his mind fractured by whatever he'd seen. I told the paramedics he'd had a bad trip on psychedelics, a lie I felt compelled to tell to protect Samantha's secret. Samantha withdrew, consumed by guilt and fear. She still performed her nightly ritual, but the care she once took was gone. Her face became crooked, its edges less seamless, and a faint odor began to emanate from it. I tried to reassure her, to remind her that none of this was her fault. But the weight of what had happened lingered between us, unspoken and heavy. As for me, the curiosity I'd managed to suppress for so long began to grow, insidious and relentless. Chris's reaction should have been a warning, a reason to bury the question forever. But instead, it fueled the fire. What could be so horrifying, so incomprehensible that a single glance could shatter a man's mind? Despite everything, I find myself wanting to know more than ever. That scares me most of all.